Today is the second in our series of UAE ecosystem roundtables, and we will be discussing with members from the UAE foundations, galleries, and institutions.
The advantages of being here is that it's still young enough for it to be changing, for it to be not a, there's still possibilities of what can happen and spaces that can open and ideas that can come out of those discussions.
And in my experience, for example, during through the Emerging Artists, the Saran Emerging Artists Fellowship, when we were putting the program together and planning it, and we're in discussions with our partners, the Rhode Island School of Design, we were talking about, so what is it going to be like during the teaching weeks, the 5-day-long teaching weeks, when the faculty are going to be interacting with those emerging artists who are just starting to create their career as artists, and when they're going to probably be harsh or critical on them, when they've never maybe experienced that sort of critique of their work, although they've graduated, some of them, from art programs from different schools in the UAE, but we did understand that the critique culture within the universities is not the same as the one that will be coming from the Rhode Island School of Design.
Yeah.
So we really did not know what to expect, and we said, you know what, we'll just let it happen. And the effect was just incredible. The response from the artists who participated said, we've never had someone talk to us about our work in this way. No one has ever asked us questions in this way that just open up so many new possibilities for us and make us then question our work as well, and go back and learn some of these, just as simple as some vocabulary also to use when looking at their work and when stepping back and kind of judging it during the process as well, not just as a finished work. So it's been a very positive experience, to be honest with you, and I think that once an artist is exposed to that, there's no going back from it. It's in fact what they want and long for.
From my point of view, because I'm an artist also, so I know the perception of the artist. So if you don't get not necessarily negative critique, but if you don't get like a feedback, someone will tell you, someone with more experience will tell you, you are doing right, you are doing wrong, or guide you in different direction, you won't grow. And you keep think that you are doing the best. You are, you know what I mean. So I think what's missing, there are mentorship programs, but I think I wish if in the future, for example, we have established artists. For example, someone from, let's say, Mohammed Kazem, who's an established artist, who will have an assistant who's an emerging artist, which is something happening in Europe all the time. For example, I used to be an assistant for an old artist, so this like will help you really a lot to grow and to learn. This is very, very important. The mentorship, the teaching, not necessarily the going to the university and go to the class and do your master, but learn on the field. And for example, working for let's say Art Dubai or Sharjah Biennale, doing internship, that's a real mentorship, because you learn on site, on the field, and you learn from people who are professional.
You can't have criticism until you have a show. You can't have art exhibitions until you have artists. You can't have an understanding of arts and museum practice until you see arts and museum practice, right? And so it's this thing where we all have to kind of keep building at the same time. We can't build one and then the other. A bunch of art critics with no museums, obviously, would be ridiculous. And I feel like one of my jobs is to keep raising the bar on exhibitions that will, on a sort of year-round basis, be pushing that envelope a little bit and asking people to engage in a critical way.
Right.
I'm doing shows that people aren't necessarily going to like. Not that they're going to be bad, but that they're not necessarily crowd pleasers, and that's my mandate. My job is to ask questions and to ask the audience to ask themselves questions. And that sort of, my hope is that will be exciting and stimulating.
When we first started doing education programs, it really started with things like little workshops, and the numbers were crazy. There was a big demand, but it just took time because of kind of, first of all, staffing and the team and building a program, and then also just testing and seeing what people, seeing the reception. And now we have a year-round program, and we have about, I don't know, like 300 kids over like a week or two from schools, and it's just, it really was kind of filling a gap and in response to what the community wanted. So what we try to do is always listen to kind of our audiences, and literally, like, they come to you and say, this is what we need, this is what we're looking for.
I think that's quite important, because that's also the way that's how the Saran Emerging Arts Fellowship program kind of emerged. Is what we wanted to do is look at the community, look at the art ecosystem, and look at what everyone else is doing, and try not to replicate that, because there are amazing efforts that everyone is doing, and we did not want to just duplicate anything. So we created focus groups and met with artists and asked them, what is it that you need? What is it that's lacking here? And it's through those focus groups that we had, and through the sessions and interviews we had with them, that we decided that the fellowship program is the perfect way to kind of take them after their graduation and after they've kind of participated in 1 or 2 exhibitions. So artists who have decided that this is what they want as a career in the future, and now help them build the foundation for that and kind of anchor themselves very strongly as artists, knowing who they are as practitioners, and help them be able to maintain their practice for the long term, so that they're not artists today and something else tomorrow, but really see this as kind of a lifetime practice.
Yeah.
So it's really the answers they gave us that helped us build the program and decide that this is what we want to do, and move on with the initiative from there.
Okay.
When I was sort of formulating the vision for what the university gallery would be, I tried to look at what does this ecosystem still need. And I actually was thinking about it as an ecosystem, and how we have a lot of what I see of as the seeds of what it takes for a really vibrant art community, and where are we not seeding, And for me, it was the sort of smaller, more exploratory, sometimes more scholarly exhibitions that don't have to worry about sales, for one, which is a very important role in the ecosystem, because artists need to, that has to happen before anything else can happen. So Sunny laid the groundwork there. And now having exhibitions where there's a certain amount of freedom, but also rigor, coming from my peers in the faculty. So I have, these faculty members who I talk to about what the exhibition plans are. They bring up deeper questions, drawing on their scholarship, which force me to work harder on the exhibition, which is really great. So already before the show even gets pitched, I'm thinking in educational terms.
Because of the sort of reimagining of it was going back to the very first point about the reimagining of institutions, but also how we think about the art world in general. And if you think of places around the world that are producing ideas that are about the reality of today's global art world, I mean, maybe Hong Kong to a certain extent, but I think Dubai is and Mumbai and other capitals are doing that. But in terms of trying to visualize a kind of global public and the ways in which cities can relate to each other, Dubai has that, or the UAE does, as a kind of production of ideas. And we see this at the fair, where a lot of curators and critics come here and they say, now I kind of begin to understand, and this has made me rethink everything that I've thought about, the ways in which artists relate to each other and the ways in which global capitals of culture relate to each other. And so I think that's a really interesting kind of element of production that can come out of the UAE. The fact that we're having this conversation about how do we build, I mean, it's a really interesting one, because I think that in many other cities there might be a sense of sort of passive consumption of culture, rather than a kind of active role in building, which is in itself a sense of kind of constantly innovating and building, and that people feel that they should have an active kind of stakeholder role in building a city. So that in itself is a kind of active innovation. And I totally agree with you as well about where is there. And I know that, and we have this all the time when people say, oh, maybe one day you'll be as big as Art Basel. And we're like, we don't want to be Art Basel. This is a completely different sort of role for a fair, and it's totally appropriate. And I think what's interesting about everybody here is that everyone's involved in organizations that are somehow sort of homegrown and are responding directly to this place. So I think, and maybe that's why there's a set, level of being effective and having this very sense of, this sense of kind of active participation in building something. And that's, I think, very different to thinking, how do we replicate something elsewhere? How do we import something? How do we compare ourselves to other people? Rather than thinking, well, we're in a very particular context of looking towards Africa, the Arab world, Iran, South Asia, Turkey a little bit further over there, and that bringing about it a completely different and very unique perspective. And the potential is so huge if you think of the way that the UAE has become such a kind of hub, and the ways in which it's relating to all these different views that it looks out on. I think that is crucial to everything, and this balance between history and the now. And
that's where innovation can play a massive role. But I think that sometimes we tend to fall into this trap of thinking of the word innovation and thinking that we always have to create something completely new, something completely creative, something that no one has kind of done before. But I think that what's more important about the word innovation to me is to constantly look at what's been done and what we've been doing, and evaluate constantly and see where can we make tweaks, where can we make changes, minor changes, and develop from there. And that's, I believe, where kind of innovation can really be very fruitful and impactful, is looking at what you've been doing and what everyone else is doing, and just asking that question, how can it be done better, and constantly evaluating. And that would take us back to looking at those years and what we've been doing, and how can we either go deeper with these efforts.
Actually, there are things, for example, production. A lot of people don't think about that, but they, to actually sit here and look at these works, they have to be produced somewhere. A lot of production does not happen here. A lot of artists don't even live here. So there's so many issues to do with, for example, people say, oh, your art studio visits. I'm like, what studio visits? There's like 5 artists, and maybe 3 of them have studios, because so there's so many things infrastructural things that are still yet to be addressed, that we can't even start to think about there or anywhere, in my mind. I mean, we've just recently started to look at our production, because we ended up spending so much money making things in Berlin and shipping it to Dubai, and I'm like, wait a second, this is insane. And then you look around, and then there are all these exhibitions that happen. I'm like, surely these people can make, these works. I mean, yes, it's different, but there is no, there are no makers like small crowd, but there will be if you encourage it. So I think it's our responsibility. So now I have someone who fully does our production in-house in the gallery, that her role is just to find these people that maybe normally didn't do artworks, and why not? It's the same materials, you just have to be a little bit more careful. So eventually maybe that guy can actually set up a studio and be a maker and have enough clients that he could survive and have. So these are vital. These are those things that build. I mean, if you don't have a place without artists living in it, and the focus should not only be on Emirati artists, with all due respect, it should be also artists that are living in Dubai, that can also have access to whatever funds and grants to be able to live here and work here.
When you were saying what's urgent, I think it's to do with archive building and a sense of deepening of history. And constantly questions from people saying, so where can I access the early films of UAE filmmakers? There's a collection at Zayed University, there's the Centre for Documentation and Research in Abu Dhabi, but those roles are quite different, and there's not necessarily a sense of, we were running so fast through the 2000s, there wasn't necessarily a sense of how does this relate to what's gone before. And also this kind of washing machine mentality of new people coming in and saying, this is done, we were talking about it, this is the first time this has ever been done, and the sort of rewriting of history all the time.
Yeah, which
and then
is...
people disappear, and it's like, boo, and then off again. I don't know how you quote me on that, but you know what I mean, it goes round and round. And instead of sort of thinking this is part of a lineage of something that comes from before. And I mean, each year around 400 media come to the fair, and probably around 60 are people on a press trip, international journalists. And it's always, war, women and censorship. And three kind of like typical questions. And it's almost, but I think over the years you build more and more understanding. I mean, now there's almost like a sense from the journalists that their editors have asked them to ask those questions, and they get them through them quite quickly before they get onto the actual work. But of course, I mean, the difficulty is that it just creates this kind of mask through which everything is somehow they attempt to interpret everything through these kind of through this mask, and also just the room that's then left to talk about form and artist practice and the work itself is limited because there's all this to get through first, which maybe is not present in the artist's mind at all, or even in the context in which the work is shown. I mean, these are obviously realities that are all around us, but some are very, very misinterpreted.
What I've noticed is that people, they default to these cliches that are not accurate because they just don't have anything else. They have no other point of reference. They only have, this is the world where X, Y, and Z happen.
And it's just
it's like
the easy way out too.
And there's no way they're going to know any better unless we actually do make some effort to show or to engage in that conversation. I feel like to some extent we do just have to do our work, but we also have to do it and acknowledge the stereotypes that are being put onto us. And I saw that happen a lot actually with the Slavs and Tatars exhibition, because they're not of here, but they're referring to, they draw on cultural references that people here are going to be much more literate in than in Europe. A lot of people miss half their work because they don't understand the cultural references that Slavs and Tatars are making. And so it's fantastic to bring them here. It's better. It's like my audience is so much more able to read their work than my audience would have been where I was before. And so it's actually, there's a lot of ways to look at what it means to be here and to directly address these stereotypes. But it's difficult because you don't want to get into some kind of argument with the press about where we are and what we're not.
I think the next 10 years, I think as far as galleries are concerned and artists, I mean, I really hope that more support is given to locally based artists. So, resident artists. I hope that, that they come up with an artist visa or something like that, so that artists can live here and work here, because otherwise you can't. Because if you don't have a job, then, So I hope that happens. And then when that happens, then you'll have more of an artistic community that meets, that speaks, that talks about each other's work. Like you go to studio visits, like proper, lots of studios, not just a few.
Right.
I think that will happen in the next 10 years, and I think that galleries will start to show less and less Middle Eastern artists and more international artists. I think that's definitely going to have to happen, because it's always at the beginning where you're sort of supporting more your own, and then the audiences are built, and then you feel, and also there's a huge international community here, so.
And for that to be a kind of exchange, I mean, there are probably more international artists that will show artists from here as well, because this happens all the time. We see it at the fair that galleries come here looking for artists as well. It's that.
Vice
so
versa.
Kind of
exactly. More of the artists from here will also show abroad, and more institutions finally will be ready, and that will change the landscape hugely. I mean, once the museums open in Abu Dhabi, I think something's happening in Dubai. I keep hearing things, but once that happens, it will change, hopefully, the landscape and how we look at art. And I think we'll see more public art as well in the lead up to Expo 2020.
Okay.
Yeah.
And once the museums come in Abu Dhabi, there'll be more of a kind of distinct set of identities where, Sharjah has the biennial and a great proliferation of museums that have been there for a long time, and then Dubai is home to artists and small-scale institutions and galleries, and then Abu Dhabi with the kind of academic and diplomatic life, and also the museums. And I think it becomes much more of an ecology, and all those places obviously have their own audiences that stick where they are, but also people are prepared to travel, and I think that's something really exciting.
Yeah.
And the fact that Dubai has, you know, the Opera District coming, D3 coming, you know, Sharjah, Al Sakal expanding, and the fact that all these, and the Future Museum, and all these kinds of innovative sort of ideas that are not museums,
Yeah.
I think is really good.